Awesome, and we will get going. So welcome to the Forge trainings. Today, October 19th, we will get started with how to view your models. Let me just move along. So my name, for those of you that haven't had a chance to get to know me or know about me, my name is Jaime Rosales. So I'm a senior developer advocate for the Forge platform, basically focusing on the experience for you guys, our customers, in order to interact with the Forge platform from a technical perspective and at the same time also a business perspective. So any questions that you may have, feel free to just submit the questions to me and we will get on it. If you're on Twitter, also I'm quite active over there. My name is AfroJME over there. Actually, the virtual screen kind of cuts off my hair right now, but you're going to ignore that for that as well. So a little bit more of background on the understanding of this training. So we will do quick sessions during the day. Basically, this is more set up as a self-learning with a live review. And we will be following along the tutorial for view models that it's hosted on our learnforge.autodesk.io site. The goal for the training will be for you to build an application that would allow you to interact with different services from the platform, such as the authentication, the data management API in order to handle all your cloud buckets. Later on, to use the model derivative API to request a translation for that uploaded file that you did. And finally, the client-side part, which is going to be the display on the viewer. So by the end of this training, you will be able to leave with an application that you can later on host, let's say, on your own environment, something like AWS, Azure, or something free, like, for example, Heroku, and that you will be able to show around and then just test directly on a site with your peers and friends. Okay? So the agenda, all times are on Pacific Time Coast. So we will start with the intro and setup. Later on, we will get back again at 10 a.m. in order to create your server and your OAuth basics. At 12 p.m., we will create the piece for the uploading of the file and the translation. And finally, at 2 p.m., we will be able to create the client-side part in order to show your model in the viewer. Approximately, each session will take around 30 minutes. A little bit less than that, to be honest. So I will give you, basically, I will drive you through some of the stuff that we are doing with the training itself. And then I will leave you to it in order for you to take care of the part that we are on the agenda. And I will leave this environment set up here. And we will be back at the top of the hour on 10 a.m., for example, in order to continue with the next section, okay? Because I know that some of you might be working and then probably you're doing this on a side part. And we just kind of want to give you time for you to explore and interact with that. So how do you ask questions? There is a location down here in your Zoom. That's a Q&A section. So you can either raise a hand to ask live or just submit a Q&A. And this Q&A will get into a queue that I will, whenever I leave you to it, I'm going to have a chance to start looking into seeing what kind of questions do you have. Okay? So now let's get started with the intro and setup. But actually, before I get started, do you guys have any questions? Feel free to submit it. Feel free to send me something on the chat. I can quickly answer. And if you don't, all good. So we can get started with the intro and setup. Okay, I don't see any movement. So that means that everything is clear as of now. So let's keep going. So 8 a.m. Pacific Time Coast, intro and setup. So a couple of requirements for us to get started. First, we will need to create a Forge account. So we're gonna head over in a bit to forge.autodesk.com. From there, we're gonna navigate to the section of My Apps, and we are gonna go ahead and create a Forge app. We will need a couple of tools for today's training. So we will be focusing on Node.js, the LTS version. Please do not get the latest preview version. It might have some issues that might actually mess up your training. So I will say stick to the LTS version. And later on, we're going to install also Visual Studio Code with the stable build. We're a big fan of Visual Studio Code. I can actually show you later on at the end of the training some of the tools that we have available for you there in order for you to basically interact with the platform in general, in order to do like quick tests of the APIs and all that stuff. So it's a really cool tool that one of my colleagues, Peter Bross, actually built. And it's been getting a lot of traction. So definitely it's something cool to look into it. So now let's move into a live demo of this section. And I think you can still see my screen. Do you see the browser for the learnforge.autodesk.io? If someone can just let me know really quick on the chat. And again, thank you, Kent. You're on top of it, man. I appreciate it. All right, cool. So the first step, I know we said we were gonna get into, oh, we have a raise hand. 1 second. I think that was by mistake. Gabriel, if you need me to unmute you to ask a question or anything like that, can you raise a hand again? If it was by mistake, don't worry about it. We can continue. Okay, I will continue. So we're gonna head over to this learnforge.autodesk.io site. This is some tool that we have created together with my team, the developer advocates for the Forge platform, that basically walks you through the entire process of how to actually get started with the platform. You here get a chance to learn the basics about the authentication, data management, file translation with model derivative, and later on the model rendering and a quick start guide for it. So for those of you that don't know about Forge in general, this kind of like summarizes a bit of what the platform is and what it's letting you do. So Forge enables companies to leverage design and engineering data in order to develop a custom software application and connect workflows for any kind of industry: manufacturing, media and entertainment, architecture, engineering, and construction. So you're able to visualize your model, centralize your data, and convert design files into formats that are basically beneficial and generalized for you to unlock their potential. So what's on this tutorial? So there is a section for before you start coding, and this is the one that we're gonna focus in at now. And then at the same time, also the tools for development. Later on, when we come back at 10 a.m. Pacific time zone, we will focus on the OAuth side of it, and we will get started with the view your models part, okay? So let's move along. And then before you start coding, if you don't have a Forge account, I will recommend head over to the Forge developer portal. So you can click here in this link. It will basically take you over to this site, right? So this is our Forge site. Oh, we have some tips and honey here. Interesting. Okay. So, and then later on, you're gonna sign in. As of now, I'm actually signed in with one of my testing accounts, and we're gonna head over into My Apps. So once we head over into My Apps, this is the location where I can start creating my API keys and my apps dedicated to the tutorial. So like I said, it's something very important that we put a lot of time onto it to specify the steps that you need to do. So you create a Forge account, you sign up if you have not one for Autodesk, or you sign in with your existing Autodesk ID. Later on, you're gonna activate your subscription. So we have a subscription that gives you a free trial of 90 days and also 100 cloud credits for you to use at no cost. You don't have to enter any kind of credit card information or anything like that. It's just, this is gonna be available for you for 90 days. Test it out. If you're happy with it, definitely come and subscribe with us. So you are going to activate your subscription. And this is very important step because other than that, we don't have services enabled like the model derivative API, which we will need for this tutorial. So later on, we're going to head over to the create an app. So on the top right, like I showed you before, when you see your name, you're going to go to My Apps. And from here, we're going to click create an app. You're going to select your APIs that you're going to be using. And at this tutorial, I will suggest let's just select all of them. That's fine. You're going to enter an application name, a description, and then you're going to enter a callback URL. So this tutorial that we're going to be doing today, it's going to have a two-legged authentication. So that means we don't need that callback. But to create our API keys, we do need one. So you can simply copy this and use it for the setup of your API keys. So like it said, this tutorial will not use the callback, but that's the URL that you use for the Autodesk Forge samples. And I think I have a question. So give me 1 second. I do or no? Danilo, do you want to ask something? If you do, please raise your hand again. Okay. If you guys have a question, you can submit it on the Q&A. It might be easier for me to just track with this because it's a one-man show at the moment. I'm the only one here from my side. So, okay, so we're gonna copy that callback URL. And then once we set up the application, we will get to see a client ID and a client secret of the newly created app. So you will need these in order to do all the auth flows, the extensions, and to complete the other tutorials as well. And very important, please do not share your API keys, especially your client secret. This basically will give anyone access to your apps and then be able to use your credits and all that stuff. So be very careful with that. So let's go ahead and create this one. So like I said, I have some other apps here from before, but we can do create an app. Right? You're going to get to see, if you activated a subscription, you're going to get to see all the APIs available here. And then we're going to name it Forge Bootcamp October 2020 Node.js. Teaching Node.js Learn material. And then we're going to set up a callback URL. Like I said, we copy that one from the tutorial section. So we copy this part and then we hit create. So now the system starts creating your application. And now we have a client ID and a client secret. So the client secret basically gets hidden because you shouldn't be able to show it to anyone. But I'm going to do something really quick and just for you to see. This is how the client ID should look. OK? And the cool thing about it that if this thing gets exposed, we can clean it again. Actually, let me try to do this. We can regenerate that secret, creates a new one. So we know that actually creates a new one. So now let me hide it. And I'm going to regenerate. And now you guys are not going to be able to know what my client secret is. OK? So that's going to be the step in order for you to create the application. All right. So now that we have the application, we're going to head over to the tools. And then from here, we're going to select the Node.js side of it. This tutorial, it's focused on Node.js. If by any chance you wanted to go into the .NET Core one, I have my colleague Augusto giving that same training at this moment. So I can happily send you the link in order for you to transfer to that one in case that's the one that you need. And you're here by mistake or anything like that. But we're going to head over to Node.js. So it says basically install Node.js engine to run your code. So you head over to Node.js. We're going to focus on the LTS version, right? So we get this recommend for most users. Then I get this latest feature one. It might have some bugs in it. Probably not, but let's stay safe with this one. And I'm not going to download this because I already have Node.js on my side, but you can go ahead and download this if you don't have it. Once it does that, it will also install NPM into your machine. So you will be able to start interacting with the dependency manager that we need to in order to run the code from our projects. So and now for the IDE, basically the one that you're going to use to write code. We suggest it doesn't have to be used. Like if you feel more comfortable with something else like Sublime Text or Atom or WebStorm or any other kind, or even like Notepad, it's up to you. You can get this IDE directly from the Visual Studio Code site. So from here, I'm on a Mac. So for me, it will be download for Mac. But then it has different options for Windows 64 user or Linux as well. Okay. So once we have that, I'll give you a little bit of information about the authentication, and then I'm going to leave you to it. Take care of whatever we just discussed, and then we will get back in a bit in order for you to ask questions away, and then we can continue with the live review. So when it comes to authentication, we have two types of authentication in the use of the platform. We have a two-legged authentication and a three-legged authentication. Basically, the two-legged workflow is, let's imagine one direction route. In one side, it's you, the developer, and the other one is the Autodesk server. And basically, with the set of keys, you're asking the server to give you permission to be able to interact with the services. So since you provided the keys, these ones are your keys, the Autodesk server will allow you to continue. It's kind of like, I think about it like a game. Like you just show the keys to the wizard, and then you open the door, and then you can continue. Now, for a three-legged section, let's think about it like a triangle. Basically, a developer needs to request Autodesk server to be approved for access for accessing data from a user. Okay, so that user will get requested by the Autodesk server saying, hey, this developer is requesting access for you for seeing your data. Do you allow it? And then the customer will say, yes, I do allow it. I want this application to show me my, let's say, BIM 360 data. And then so it tells yes to the server, and the server now tells, yes, you're allowed to continue to the developer, and then we're good to go. Okay? So that's basically kind of like a small explanation about the differences of these two authentications. And then we move into the scopes. So the scopes are basically the permissions that you're giving your token. Sometimes you just want to open a door that only allows you to visualize models in the viewer, but doesn't allow you to do creation of data, deleting of data, or anything like that. So we define this with the scopes. And then at the same time also, I will say read about this, because in the tutorial, we manage tokens in two different ways, a public and an internal. So public, it's a token that gets basically set up in the client side. So we tend to only use the viewable read scope. So if that token gets exposed for some reason, it's okay. Like they cannot do anything with that token other than visualizing your models, if that's kind of like what you want for users to do. And now the internal one, this is the one that needs to be running on the server side, because this will not be exposed to the customer or to the public in general. And you will be able to do different kind of actions in here, like create buckets, read buckets, create data, and so on. Okay. So now, like I said, we will move into the view your models sample later. And that's it for this section. So I will ask you really quick, do we have any questions? And if you do, and you want to ask live, you can raise your hand and I can unmute your mic. And if not, you can send me a question through the Q&A or the chat, and we can discuss from there. Okay. Oh, there is one question. Cool. Are these online document tutorials updated regularly? Yes. Yeah. So we tend to add like more sections quite often. I think that during this year, we haven't had a need of actually updating something. Maybe just on the design automation tutorial, we added a section for Node.js, and we're working on a section there for for the, what's the Civil 3D design automation. And then for reference, we'll do these trainings sessions this week will be recorded. Yes, as you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but I am actually recording this right now. So they will become available after we finish during the week. So that way you guys will be able to access all the different 5 trainings that we have. Then I have a chat. It says, what is the URL for the instructions you are showing us? Okay, so let me get back on this. This is the tools. Here it is. Oh, good catch. I actually do not. Oh, yeah, I do have it, but it's here. So the instructions that I'm showing you can be found at learnforge.autodesk.io. Okay, so this will take you to this site, basically, learnforge.autodesk.io. And from here, you can start following up those instructions. Yep, sure thing, Kent. All right, so answer live, done. Cool. So if you don't have any more questions, let me move to, so again, what do we have to do? Hands-on, create the accounts, install the software, and then we will be back at 10 a.m. Oh, it's actually PST, not BST, sorry, with the server and auth section. In the meantime, you can ask us questions and I will get back to you as soon as I see those. Let's see, one more question. Will we be using GitHub repo during the week, or is it just these calls? So if you prefer, you can do the GitHub side of it. I always recommend it for you to, after you're done with your day in the training, you have your code safely secure somewhere in the cloud. So that way you can submit that to GitHub from there. But for this training or the other ones, it's actually not required for you to be able to get that. For off-call communication, is there a Slack or Discord to use? At this moment, no, we do not have. So I will have to leave this thing on. So the Zoom will still be on. The only thing is I'm not going to be here for most of the time, so I will just get back closer to the hour. But keep submitting your questions whenever, like when I say I'm not going to be here, it doesn't mean like I'm going to be having the camera on for the entire rest of the day. I would just probably go get some coffee or something like that and then come back and answer your questions. So any questions that you may have, just submit them here on the Q&A queue, and I will get back to them. Okay? Answer live, done. All right. Okay, guys. So you know what you have to work on. So go ahead, create accounts, install the software. Some of you might finish early, and feel free to continue if you guys want to continue. This is more about, because some other questions may arise during that time. So definitely keep going on that. And for that, I'm gonna stop my recording. I'm actually just gonna resume recording. All right, well, thank you again for joining us back. Before I move ahead and start with the server and OAuth section, I want to find out if you guys have any question. I got some questions during the waiting time, but I just want to know if everybody is doing fine with the previous step of setting up your account and getting the API keys and all that. And I don't see any interaction, so I will assume that will be a yes and that we're good to continue. If not, just feel free to send a Q&A. All right, so we will review that the setup is ready. So basically, by now, we should have our Forge account and application, so the client ID and secret. And then at the same time, also the IDE installed and running. So I have my IDE. Where is it? Right here. So we have the IDE. One way that we can check that we have Node, it's directly from the IDE. We can do node -- version. This will give us the version that Node is currently installed. Same thing we can do for npm. So we have npm and node install. All right, cool. So we're good to continue. All right, so like I said, any questions, please feel free to submit it to the Q&A, raise your hand. I can open up your mic, and then from there, we'll continue, okay? All right, so again, we have the Forge app with all the APIs selected, the setup of the callback URL, and the ID and the secret. We have Node.js and Visual Studio Code. Good. This is for .NET stuff, but we're gonna move up and keep moving forward. So now the next step is that we're gonna create the Node.js server, and we will start with using npm in order to do the init side, the installation of all the packages, which will create a later. We will create a launch.json for the configuration of our deployment of the API keys. We will create a start.js file and a config.js file, followed by an auth.js file. Okay, so let's move ahead and go back to the live demo for this. Okay, so we will move here, and we're gonna start with create server part. So basically here, we will create a server that basically will protect the confidentiality of your client ID and secret, which is bounded to your account in your web application. So we will keep this always on the server. Do not expose your client ID or secret, please, to the client side, because other than that, people can get access to those keys and they will start basically spending your credits, and we don't want them to do that. So we move into the Node.js side of it. And in your machine, we're gonna create a folder. So it says, do not use spaces to avoid any special characters. So for this tutorial, we're gonna use a simple Forge sample. So while I do that, let me actually bring this screen to the other side. Let me show here. We're gonna bring it here. Okay, so we are in the location. So we're gonna move into documents. And then in here, we're gonna move into, I have one that is called Forge development. And then in here, we're gonna make a directory, bootcamp, auth 2020, cd into that one. And then we're gonna make another directory here that we're gonna call Forge sample. cd into that Forge sample. Okay. And then we are inside of the Forge sample. Okay. So now what we can do is open this folder. So we're gonna open a folder, documents. We're gonna go to Forge development, bootcamp, Forge sample. Open this one. Okay. So now we have our Visual Studio in the location of the Forge sample. And as you can see, we don't have anything here yet, but that's about to change really quick. So we're gonna open again the terminal in order for us to be able to start writing the commands that we need. So as you see, and now it shows me that I'm inside of this Forge sample. So if we check anything in the folder, it's empty, so we don't have anything yet. But let me get back to here, and it says create a Forge sample folder. Then we open Visual Studio Code file, open that folder. We did that. Then we're gonna do view the integrated terminal, and the window will show up at the bottom, which it shows up. And then we're gonna start following the steps. And then for consistency with other Forge samples, we tend to use the entry point as start.js. So the first thing that we're gonna type in that terminal, it's this npm init. And before I move ahead, I have a chat on it. Hello, I have a front-end only application in React.js. This application must show a model accessible through an error. How do you update the token automatically? All right, Danilo, so let me move ahead with this. When I'm done with this section of the bootcamp, I can get back to you and start doing the questions, okay? Okay, so now we're gonna head back here and we're gonna start with the npm init command. basically this will start creating a package.json file that we're going to be using in our application. So the package name, it's telling me that it's going to be called Forge sample. So we hit enter. It's going to be version 1.0.0. That's good. Enter. Description, bootcamp 2020 Forge. Entry point index.js. But if you remember, we said that for consistency with other ones, we're going to call it start.js to be our entry point. Test command, can leave it empty for now. Git repository, we don't have any Git repository for this now, so also keep stays empty. Keywords, Forge, author, Jaime Rosales, or your name. You don't have to type mine. License ISC, or we can do MIT, and then we can look into it. So does this look correct? Basically, it's creating the package JSON.file, Forge sample, version, description, the main entry point, start.js. This is the important one. Please pay attention to this one, because or not, your project at the end of this is not going to run. Scripts, it does a default one for the testing, which basically just do an echo to be if there is any test specific, and it just exits from there. The author and license being MIT. Is this okay? Answer is yes. Okay, so now we have a package JSON that got created. So if we open this, we see that we have that file that just recently got created. All right, cool. So we're good to continue. So now it says, so this creates a package JSON. And if you want to learn more about what the package JSON is or how are you going to be using it, there's a link here for you to go ahead and learn more. And this is something that you can do after while we move into the next section. So now to install the packages. So by default, an Node.js project is empty, as we saw that. So we need to install a few packages with npm install in order to start the basic Express server, Molter that we were going to be using for a file upload, and of course the Autodesk Forge one. So we're going to run one npm install at a time. And we're going to start with npm install express -- save in order to add it to the package JSON and just be there the whole time. Okay. So let me clean up. Sorry, let me clean up. Why is it not taking the cleanup? There we go. So npm install express -- save. Okay, so we hit that one. And now we see that the dependency now, it's added to be Express 4.17.1 and any version above that. And then we also see that a node modules folder got added. So that means that now our Express dependency for Node, it's hosted in this node. And then as you see also Node and Express depends of a lot of other modules. So that's the reason they get installed at the same time, okay? So there's no vulnerabilities, and one minor version of npm is available. We're going to skip that one for now. Clear that, and then we're going to do the same thing, npm install Molter -- save. Okay, so now Molter is installed. So version 1.4.2 and above, it's part of our project now. And then last but not least, we're going to start the Forge APIs one. So we can even just copy this. npm install Forge APIs -- save. This might have some extra space, so let's get rid of that. And let's try it. All right, cool. So now we have our dependencies installed into the project. We have the Express, we have Forge APIs, and we have Molter. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. So now, like I said, that -- save parameter basically will indicate the package JSON that this will be a dependency for our project. So it will just add it and just keep it there. Because if you install it without that -- save, and then by mistake you run again npm install, since it was not part of your package JSON, it will remove all dependencies related to that module that you install directly in the terminal. Sometimes you can do that if you want to test out some stuff. So it's up to you, honestly. So finally, it says open the package JSON, and inside of the scripts, add a start node start.js. So we're gonna get this new description. Be sure that you have that comma. Actually, we might not need it if you put it on the bottom, but we need it if we don't do this one. So we go back to here. And now the scripts, gonna modify that, and we're gonna add start node start.js. So I don't think we're gonna use this, to be honest, but some people like it more to do npm start instead of using the debugging tool that Visual Studio Code gives you. I actually like the Visual Studio Code debugger, so I think we're gonna be using that. Okay, so now Forge, the version Forge APIs may vary. So basically the latest version that we had on this tutorial was the 4.1. I think we're up to, wow, yeah, we gotta update that. So 7.3. So it's good. We have more functionality from the APIs available on that npm. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna create some folders and files also in the Explorer section of that tutorial. So we're gonna do a new folder or a new file, and then we're gonna create a routes folder for all the server-side files and a public folder for everything client-side files related. So at this point, your project should have the following folder structure, okay? So we are missing the node modules in there, but let's add the other ones. So we're gonna add a new folder, and we're gonna call this routes. We got another one, so click outside. And we're gonna call this, what was it, public? I think, yes. Yes, public, okay, cool. And as you see, also we have a package-lock.json. So this was created by npm, so don't worry, you don't have to interact with this file at all. It's just a reference of what it got installed in that node modules folder. All right, later on, we're gonna do a launch.json configuration. So basically, this file will tell Visual Studio Code that how you are gonna run your project. So when you add a debug configuration, you will select the environment to be Node.js, and then it will create a file similar to this, but with some information missing. So we will need to replace that information with this new one in order for setting up our environment and take advantage of the debugger tool that will use the client ID, secret, and callback URL. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're gonna do run. We're gonna add a configuration. It's probably gonna start installing some other stuff that you may have in your machine. So we can give it a second. All right, so now it tells you to select the environment. I have a couple of environments based on stuff that I tend to use for my daily coding and testing and all that stuff. But for this, we're gonna be using the Node.js one. So we select Node.js. Actually, let me make this a little bit bigger. So we have Node.js, and then as I told you, it's gonna have some sort of default look, but we can replace that with the other one that we're giving you on the tutorial. So we're gonna copy this one, come here, select everything, and replace it. And then save. Now, if you see this, we have a Forge client ID and secret location that says your ID needs to be here, okay? So what we're gonna do is that from our app, we can get client ID and paste it here. And I apologize, I just need to, I don't know who's ringing at my door. 1 second, I'll be right back. One pause for now. Okay, I'm back. All right, so where were we? Yes, client ID. So right now I'm not gonna show you the client secret, but you will end up adding your own client secret after we start setting up for this part. And we're gonna save this file. And I have a question, 1 second. Are there documents or examples of working with VS Code to set up the workspaces and folder structures like you did at the beginning? Yep. So basically what I'm showing you with the Learned Forge material, it's exactly this set of steps that I'm doing. So if you need more clarification, please let me know. Okay. So let's get back to the tutorial. Okay, so like I said, it's important for you to define the ID and the secret as your environmental variables, because in that way, the project, whenever it gets deployed online, it's going to be easier for you to reference from whichever section you're actually hosting it. Let's say if you do AWS, you can reference those environmental variables to your own Forge client ID and secret later on setup, and the same thing for Heroku. Okay, so now, like I said, the entry point at the root folder, we're going to create a start.js file. And this file, like I said, it's quite case sensitive for stuff like in Heroku and all that. So make sure you have a start.js file exactly like this name, okay? And from here, this is where we're going to set up the initiation of our Express server with the requirement of which port it's going to be running on, the configuration, where is it going to come in order to obtain our credentials and client ID, and also the client secret part. And later on also to set up an Express app that is going to be using all the static content coming from the public folder, and also start using everything requirement based for the authentication, the OSS, the model derivative, that is going to be coming from the routes folder into a new set of endpoints defined to be API Forge Auth, API Forge OSS, and API Forge model derivative. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create that file. Okay, so we're going to select this side of it. We're going to create a new file at this root level. We're going to call it start.js. Okay, so what's going to be on start.js? Basically, again, a const to the path module that we're going to be using, which got installed when we installed the Molter. A const to the Express module as well, that it's able to be referenced whenever we install this Express router, the Express module, sorry. And later on, the cost for the port in order to do the process environment for the different port that we're going to be using. And then a reference to the configuration file that we will be creating after this one. So we can easily copy this one, get here, save this, and explain a bit more about this. So the file that we're going to create after, which is this configuration file, it will have references to the credentials. In the credentials, we will have access to the client ID and the client secret. And this variables itself will reference the values that we're adding on this launch.json configuration. Okay? Later on, like I said, it will start creating all the public content for the express router to come from the public folder. So whatever we put in here, it's what the server is going to be running on the public side. And then also the app is going to be using information about the authentication, the OSS, and the model derivative that is going to be hosted in this routes folder. And basically after that, it will console log into the debug console in which port the server is listening to in order for us to test it. All right, so let's move along and let's do the configuration.js. Okay, so now again, in the root folder, we will create a file name called configuration or config.js with the following content. So the module export will set up the environment variables to be the values of, like I said, an object with the value for the credentials to have client ID, client secret, and callback URL. And at the same time also, access to the different kind of scopes. So something that I defined before about the scopes, which are the permissions that we're giving the token, we will have different ones for the internal and different ones for the public, okay? So we can go ahead and copy this thing and go in here, select outside, add config.js. Paste this here. I think everything looks correct. Okay, cool. So like I said, we will be defining those environmental variables here whenever we're running that Express server. So make sure that you have this kind of file structure in order for the bootcamp code to find the right location, okay? All right, so at this point, your project seems to be in a ready state. It's not gonna do anything yet because we haven't written the code yet, but the file structure itself, it's what we're gonna be using for the rest of the project, okay? So now we're gonna move into the authentication part. So like I said, for this tutorial, the view models one, we're gonna be using the two-legged authentication, which basically defines you as a developer sending the set of keys to the Autodesk server in order to get the permissions to access the services, okay? So we're gonna do that right now. So again, we're gonna choose our language to be Node.js, and from here, we're gonna create an auth.js file inside of the routes folder. So we're gonna create auth.js file, which this will take care of basically creating the entire express router for all the auth related endpoints. So whenever our project starts calling, let's say, jaimeforge.com/token in the client side, we will get a reference to this router in order to process and obtain, for example, a public token with the values of the access token and the expiration in time. And this is the response that we're gonna get back in order for us to be able to pass in that token on the public side. So again, simply we can copy this one, get back here. Now inside of routes, we're gonna create a new file. We're gonna call it auth.js. And again, express, we're gonna get the get public token from the common folder in a file that's called auth. But if you know, this is not created yet. We're still missing this. So we need to take care of this part right now in order for our OAuth file to be able to reference the correctly get public token function, because we will be using it later. So if you see right now, and if we try to do a go to definition, basically tells you that goes here and then go to definition, and there is no definition found yet, okay? But don't worry about it, we will create it right now. So let's save this file and get back here. So now we give you the information for creating this auth.js file. I know it has the same name, but the difference is that now it will be inside of a new folder that it's called common. Okay, so it's a subfolder of routes. And from here, we're going to be basically requesting the access token for Forge. And then we have a way to do an OAuth client two-legged that will come from the Forge APIs module. We require the use of the configuration file that we did previously. And this will basically initialize that two-legged authentication side. So we will have a function for get client. So then another one, which is going to be an asynchronous function to get the token itself. And this get token will be used by either the public token, where we're going to do get token, passing in the value of the public scopes that we defined in the configuration.js file before. Or if we're doing some server-side stuff, we will need an internal token. So we will get a token with the configuration scopes internal defined. And we will be exporting these modules as well for us to be able to use it. Okay? So let's copy this, and we're going to get back here. We're going to select routes because now we need a subfolder. We're going to call it common. Now we're going to select common, and we're going to create a new file. It's going to be called auth.js. And in here is where we're going to create those functions for the get internal token, the public token, the asynchronous function that those two functions are going to be using, which is called get token, and then another one for get client, which this get token uses in order to set up the part of the scopes and so on. Okay, so we save this. Now, if we go back here, and now we do go to definition, it goes back to the module export of where this thing is actually defined. Okay, so that way we know that we already route everything that we need in order for this auth to actually work. Okay, so basically, to avoid getting a new access token for each end user request, you can cache them into global variables, but we will need to still get refresh tokens after a certain expiration time. So this is some kind of practice that you can do at some point in order to do this kind of handling of tokens. Tokens usually tend to expire within 60 minutes, so it's something to keep in mind. Three-legged tokens have an option to do refresh. Two-legged tokens, you will need a new token every time, or just play around with the expiration time in seconds in there. Okay? So share access tokens between users is only valid in this case where all users are accessing the same information two-legged. If your app uses per user data, which is a three-legged, do not use this approach. Okay? All right. So before we move into the OSS, which will be our next section, we're going to move into, this is something, again, I have PST here, PST. So this is something that you guys are going to work on it right now. So you're going to create a server, you're going to do the authentication piece, and we will be back at 12 p.m. PST in order to ask some questions, check how it went, and then move along with the next section of the tutorial, which will be the upload file in OSS and translation of the file to later on finish up with the show in viewer. Okay, so good luck with this. I'm gonna stay over a bit more because I do have a couple of questions that people ask about, so we can stay on it. And I think the first one was Kent, I believe. You were having problems with the Molter part. So let me just enable this part 1 second. Hi, Kent.
Hello.
All right, so let me stop my recording for a second, and that way you can share me your screen.
Okay, it actually appears to be working now. I'm not sure what the issue was, but I tried running the install again, and it started working. So.
Oh, awesome. So are you good to continue, I guess?
I believe so. Yes, I'm actually done with the lesson you did, so I'm ready for the next one at 12. So
All right, perfect. Well, good job.
awesome. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Okay. All right. So welcome back. I had a chance to speak to some of you before this part, so I hope you guys are up and ready for the next section. So just the next section will be the upload and the translate part. And before we get started with that, so on the previous section, we got the project created for the server setup and also the OAuth code. So if you have any questions, please submit it during the Q&A. And after I'm done, I can go over with you about creating this. Oh, ignore this thing. I don't know what's see you at 1 p.m. All right, so for the upload and translate on the Node.js section, we are going to be doing the following file, which is going to be the oss.js. In this file, we'll mainly focus using the OSS service that comes in from the data management API in order for you to be able to create your buckets and also upload those files to those buckets. And then later on also the modal derivative JS, which will be the one in charge of actually triggering that translation. So any kind of file that you upload, let's say out of the 60 plus different file formats that we support, we will trigger a translation in order to convert it into an SPF, which is what the viewer basically understands in order to display you the geometry and also the metadata from that CAD file. So that way we will be able to interact with the viewer and you will have a viewer application running. Okay. So let's do a live demo for that. So let me kill this and let's head over here. And we are done with this. So we're going to move into the next section, which is the upload file to OSS. So in data management, we have this object storage service that basically it will store our files in this cloud buckets. So if you're familiar with AWS, AWS has this service, it's called Simple Storage Service or AWS S3 that basically handles this kind of bucket mentality. So think about it as a container where you can upload files and just basically store data in it. So Forge, because it's based on using AWS on the back, it uses the same kind of structure for the buckets on AWS. So there is something that you need to keep in mind whenever you create a bucket. There are some retention policies. So what this means is we have 3 different kind of retention policies. We have a transient policy, which is basically like a cache-like storage that will keep your stuff for 24 hours. So it's ideal for this kind of ephemeral object. So let's say you create an application, you want to give access to customers for them to just test out and upload a file and then take a look at it. And then after the next day, it will just wipe it out and it will no longer be available in there. So for this tutorial, actually, we're using this policy. But I will make a reference to where this policy is set up. So if you decide to switch it, and if you don't want to run on a transient policy, that's completely okay. You can either switch it to the temporary one, which will give you a chance to store your translated files and persist for 30 days. Or the other one, which will be a persistent policy that basically will persist, for that matter, until you decide to delete it, okay? So it will be up to you. Like I said, the code in this sample, it's built with the transient policy, but it's a really quick and easy change in case you want to focus onto the other one, okay? Also, this tutorial, we have done something in the back in order to avoid this duplication of bucket names. So buckets need to be completely unique when it comes to the name. So for example, in the same thing shares with everyone across the AWS environment. So customers using AWS S3, Forge customers using OSS buckets, they cannot share names. So let's say if I come in and I try to create a bucket named test, most likely somebody already created a bucket named test. But to avoid that in this tutorial, what we did is we have a simple snippet of code in the back that in case you end up typing test, it will work. And the reason behind it is because we're storing the key and the name of that bucket with a prefix. So what that means is instead of in the system being test, it will have your Forge client ID in a transparent way. So it will not show in the UI, but in the system in the back, it will actually take it into consideration to avoid this duplication of names. So let's say it will have this value. The difference is that buckets only take lowercase characters. So we grab this value of the client ID because we have it available in our project. We make everything lowercase, and then we do test after. So in that way, we are like the test value that you enter, it is actually unique. But in the UI, the user will never actually get to see this value. It will only get to see the name test. So just something to keep in mind. If you try to do another test bucket in your application, it will not let you because there is already one that got created like that. So just for you as an FYI. All right, so let's move along with this. So we're going to choose again our language. So in this case, Node.js. And we're going to start doing the part for the OSS. So the OSS section will need 3 features for this. One of them will be first to create buckets. So we need to create that bucket, right? Where we're going to be storing stuff and then uploading the files and all that. After that, we're going to create a new function that it will let us list our buckets and also our objects that we're uploading because we want to kind of see the folder structure, right? And later on, we will give a function to be able to upload those files to the buckets. There's 2 ways to upload files. One of them is just an upload an entire file. We tend to use this for files that are not too big. I will say if the files are under 100 megabytes in size, this kind of workflow works fine. Like I wouldn't worry too much about it. Even a little bit bigger ones could work fine, but you always run into this thing about like, let's say if something gets timeout in your connection, you might actually not be able to upload that file and it will get cut off in the middle or something like that. So there is another way, which is called upload by chunks, which is a good practice whenever you're uploading a lot of files. Sorry, a larger file. So basically grabs the file, chops it in little chunks, and then starts uploading asynchronously. So it's a good way to do it. But in this tutorial, we're going to focus only on the upload all at once, okay? And I can show you the endpoint after if you guys are interested in exploring the upload by chunks function. Okay, so we're going to get into this first. We are going to create in the routes folder an oss.js file with the following content. So again, we're going to do a const to the fs module. I think this is for the file system, so it's part of Node. Then we're going to do one for the Express because this is an Express app. We're going to now use the Multer one because we need Multer in order to do the uploading of the files. And then also we're going to invoke a couple of the APIs that are coming from the Forge APIs module. So the Buckets API, which because we're building buckets, the Objects API in order to do this, uploading part of the objects, and the Post Buckets payload, okay? So, and then from there as well, we need to get the client. And in this case, if you see, now we're going to focus with getting an internal token because we need those permissions in our token in order for us to be able to interact with the creation of the buckets, the uploading of data, the writing of data. So our token itself, it needs this certain kind of permissions. And we don't need to worry because everything is happening actually on the server side. So it's nothing exposed directly on the client side. It's just from the client side, whenever we select that action of creating a new bucket, it sends a call to the endpoint that we define, like the router that we define in order to do this part, okay? So, and this is gonna be coming from the common OAuth JS file. And then again, we need a requirement of the configuration file. So we start with the router. So we are gonna be using an express router. And then for obtaining that token, we are gonna do an async router in order to get an internal token, which is gonna get us the token and also the client value, and then hit next. And then from here, we're gonna start building those routers to buckets, okay? So basically it says here, the get API forge OSS buckets expects a query parameter of ID. If the parameter is a hashtag or an empty, it returns a JSON with the list of the buckets. Otherwise, it returns a JSON with the list of the objects in the bucket with a given name. It's kind of cut off there. So yeah, basically what this thing is doing is that when it makes a call, if you want to list your buckets, it checks what's the query ID, which is the bucket name. If the bucket name comes in with an ID, it will display you the buckets. If it comes in with a hashtag, it will start navigating down in order to show you the objects. So depending on what, this is what it's gonna do. And then let's see, retrieve objects from the forge using the objects API. So we're gonna be using here the objects API dot get objects, and then we pass in certain parameters, like we have to give it the bucket name because we want to know which objects are going to be listing from which bucket, and then also an authentication client and the authentication token, okay? And then let's see, ID buffer from object ID into string base64. Yeah, all right, so now let's move into this. This is a post to the bucket. So basically, this is the route that we're going to be using in order to create a bucket. Okay, so it is going to be a post call to that bucket's endpoint in order for us to be able to create the bucket. So it has a body request that we need to send into that JSON payload, and it's going to be basically the value of the bucket key and assign the new bucket name. Okay, so we get the post buckets payload, and then you remember that we invoked that one from the Forge APIs module, right? And then we get passing in, this is what I'm talking about when I said we were gonna get your client ID in order to make it a unique name. So, and we're gonna make it all to lower cases. So we get config.credentials.client ID value, which reads it from the process environment value, sets it up everything to lowercase, and then it adds a dash, and then the request body bucket key. That basically it's what you as a user it's gonna input at the time of creating this. And then here it's the location for the policy. So like I said, this tutorial sets up everything with a transient policy. If you don't want to do that, you can simply, at the time that you're writing this code into your IDE, double click on it and then just name it a different thing, either the temporary one or the persistent. It will be up to you, okay? And then we start with the create bucket where we pass in the payload, which is a combination of these two kind of things, the request OAuth client and the token. And then if everything is good, we respond with a status 200, meaning that everything went well. And now we're gonna use this to upload the new objects to the given bucket. And this time we're going to be using the Molter definition. So basically the destination for the uploads, we're going to do a single file to upload and then pass in again with the objects.api reference from the Forge API's module, the upload bucket function, where we're going to pass in to which bucket are we going to be uploading, what's going to be the original name, what's going to be the length of that data, what's going to be the data that we upload, and then the auth client and the token. And everything goes well. We got a status 200, and that means that the file got uploaded successfully. And then we export everything in regards to the router with this model.exports in order for us to be able to access it from the client side. So since we plan to support, so let me explain this a bit different. So in the tutorial, we are using a third-party library that it's called JS3. What this does, basically, it's a way for us to create kind of like a root file experience for folder structure. So where we can have a primary folder and then start showing you some objects in the bucket, or maybe if there is another subfolder, we can start showing you another level. And this library has different options. You can do checkboxes and stuff like that. And it's supported in a lot of different web browsers. And here's some of the information in case you want to modify the JS3 that we have. You can look into this and then just, I don't know, create a different experience, whatever it will fit best to whatever you're trying to do. Okay? But we wanted to keep it as simple as possible. So we ended up using this JS3 in order to get information with that bucket's endpoint, to get that ID query string parameter of the bucket name, and then later on also with the objects that get uploaded. And then it says, note how we reuse the authentication helpers from routes common auth.js as a middleware of this router. Okay, so if you see, we're always using this rec auth client, rec auth token, and so on. Okay, so a little warning. It says uploading a file from the client browser directly to Autodesk Forge is possible, but it requires giving the client a writing enable access token, which is not secure. So just something to keep in mind, okay? But that's the reason we do everything on the server side, to just keep it as secure as possible. Okay, so let me do this thing first before I move on. So I'm going to copy this thing here. I go in here. And now in routes, we're going to add a new file, which the name is oss.js. We paste here, save it. Then we check that everything is fine. Just move my zoom bar, which I don't think you guys can see. So we have, again, the FS module, the Express, the Molter, the Forge APIs, the definition for the OAuth, the common OAuth, which we get client and get internal token, and config from the config file. So notice how you go up one level to the I guess home level, I guess, or the route. No, it will be more the root level on the project of Forge sample, and then we just go inside of the config.js, and we get that config access to it. And then we do, like I said again, the middleware for obtaining the token, the get for buckets, which I will explain how it works whenever we start building the client side, and then the router post to create the buckets, and the router post to upload the objects, and we expose them through the router with the model exports. Okay, so it's looking good. All right, so now let's move ahead. And then the next thing will be, we need to create the part for translating the file. So translation of files. Basically, for this, we're going to be using the model derivative API. which allows you to represent this and share the design different formats into valuable metadata. So think about it. You have source file. This source file could be a Revit file, an Inventor file, a SketchUp file, uh, Fusion file, SolidWorks file, like a TIA file, whatever you want. I think it supports around 60 plus different file formats. I think at this point I haven't found that many that we are not supporting like natively, but we support Autodesk CAD formats and also non-Autodesk ones. That's the reason I mentioned SolidWorks and SketchUp, for example. And then depending of what do you want to do with the model derivative, we have a couple of different options for the output. So you grab the source file and then you translate it. And you can translate it into a new format. So it can be something generalized like an STL or an OBJ file, or the SBF file, which later on the viewer will use in order to display us that geometry and also the metadata for it. At the same time, let's say you're creating this kind of like website that has some gallery look tiles of previous of your models. The model derivative also can help you out to extract those thumbnails of a preview of the model. So you can use those thumbnails in order to create this gallery looking view. Now, let's say you are a provider of doors and you don't care about anything else in the model other than just the doors. And you want to get information about the doors and then just the geometry of the doors. So you could do like a filter geometry extraction using model derivative as well. So you can just focus on everything that matches the category of a door and then just extract that kind of geometry. But now let's say you're that same provider of doors and you don't care about the geometry. You want to know just the measurements of the doors, the material type, or I don't know, the area that basically occupies in the model. You could do a data extraction only. And basically you would just get a chunk of JSON response with all that information that you care about. Okay. So like I said, in this section, we're going to be calling that post job to get the translation started in order to give us back that translated file into an SBF and be able to use it on the viewer. So again, we're going to be using the Node.js tutorial. And from here, we're going to be focusing on the translate model. So we need to create routes and then model derivative.js. So we're going to create a model derivative.js file with the following content. So again, Express, because it is an Express application. And then from here, we need to invoke a lot of different functions that are coming from the Forge APIs and the model derivative one, like the derivatives API, and then the job payload input, job payload output, and the job SBF output payload. Again, get client and get internal token because this needs the right permissions in order to be able to do the translation. And we're going to get this started with the router assigned to an Express router. So again, same kind of thing. The middleware for obtaining the token for each request, similar to the previous one that we just did. And then we're going to be doing the router for it. So for the router, again, we're going to be focusing on submitting a new translation job for this given object URN. So whatever it sends basically the value of a URN. And what is a URN? It's what the viewer uses to identify the path location to the bucket. And this URN, it's usually encoded in base 64. So it's going to look like a long kind of set of characters. But if you decode that base 64 URN, you can see the path of actually where it's located pertaining to your account. Okay. And you will only get access to that URN if you're passing along a token that is generated with your API keys that match that. Other than that, you don't have access per security reasons. Okay. So we're going to do the router post /jobs. It's an asynchronous function that will start doing all the necessary setup. So first, we're going to assign it to the job payload to a job. Then we're going to assign the input to a job, the input URN to a job, and then the output. And then the output formats are going to be of type SVF, which is what we need for the viewer, and also format views of 2D and 3D. Some Revit files, for example, have 2D view sheets, and we kind of want to get everything in regards to the content of that file. And I can tell you later also, if you don't have any CAD files for you to test the application, I can tell you where to go and get some testing ones. And then we're going to do the submit of that translation to the derivatives API with the information that we need to pass in, which is job, which already got all this information from here, the request OAuth client and the request OAuth token. And if everything goes well, we get back a status request of 200. That means that it went well. Then we export it to the router, and now we have access to it. So like I said before, the Java endpoints will receive the object name, and that translation is going to extract the 2D and 3D views from the model. And to summarize, at this point, your Node.js application should look something like this. It's still missing the node modules here. I think we need to do some update on the imagery. But yeah, so we focus on the routes, common, auth, and then outside of common, in the routes level, model derivative, auth, and OSS. Then we have config, package JSON, and start.js, and your launch JSON. Okay? So we are going to go ahead and do this one. So we copy again, go here. We did the OSS, click routes, new file, model derivative.js. Derivative. I might spell that wrong sometimes. Derivative. Yes, we're good. Happens. So I will say keep an eye on whatever you're actually typing, because I have spent time before with other customers trying to figure out what is wrong with this project. And it's because maybe one of these letters, it's swapped. So instead of saying derivatives, it says derivatives. And it's kind of hard to see it at the beginning. And everything looks okay, but at some point it doesn't work. It doesn't run because we do a lot of references to these files later on, right? So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so now we save this. And at this point, like this part said, we should have launch JSON, common auth, model derivative, auth.js, OSS, config, package lock, package.json, start.js. Start.js, package JSON, lock, config, OSS, auth, model derivative, auth instead of common, and launch JSON, and not modules too. So I think we're good. Next, we'll be working on the public one. So let me get back here. Current slide. All right. Oh my God. I keep having this BST. I don't know how I got that. Yeah, it's fine. I'll try to make it to the next one to see if it doesn't actually happen again. All right. So questions, anything that I can help you out with? If not, you have things to do. And I will be back with all of you at 2 p.m. Pacific Time Coast. And we will be working on the next section and final session of today's bootcamp, which will be the show on the viewer. So in the meantime, please, if you have any questions, do you want to talk also over mic, just raise your hand. I can unmute your mic, and then we can keep going with that. Okay? So questions going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, no questions for now. So thank you guys, and I will see you back at 2 p.m. PST. And you can leave your questions in the Q&A. I'll get to answer them in a bit. So yeah, good luck with this. We're getting close, and that way you are gonna be able to have your first like Forge application to be displaying the content on it. Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you, guys. Soon. Okay. Cool. So at this point, so before we get into the last section, which is going to be showing on the viewer, you should have the upload code and the translate code. Do we have any questions about this? If you do, please just ping on the chat or on the Q&A, or raise your hand if you want me to unmute you. All right, so if you don't have any questions, let's keep going. So what's next? Well, now the cool part, the viewer code. And I say the cool part because it tends to be something that you have a way to visualize. We took care of a lot of the backend stuff right now. I like backend in personal opinion, but I know sometimes it's just like we did a lot of stuff. We want to see it work and do something, right? So this is what we're gonna get to work on it right now. And if you want, I can do this a little bit slower, and that way you guys are able to kind of like follow along while I explain this. And that way we don't have to wait until a long time again. I know it's been quite a few hours, so we can just, I can focus on the amount of people that are here that might have an issue and want me to take a look at their code and all that for the next time right now. And that way you guys are happy and leave with something working on it today. Okay. So let's get started. So first, we're going to be working on the HTML, which is going to be the main file, so the index.html, that whenever our Express server refers to it, it's going to be being displayed on the screen itself. We need some CSS in order to do this formatting of the page. It's basically placed out the viewer in a certain location, the JS3 in a different location, and then just kind of make it look minimalist, pretty in some way. And then the JavaScript files, which are going to be the ones that actually make our actions in order to launch the viewer, visualize the bucket, upload the files, be able to translate the bucket, the files, not the bucket. And yeah, and then we're good to go. So let's go to live demo for this. All right, and let's see. Okay, cool. Where are we? So we're back to here, and we're gonna move into the LearnForge documentation. We're gonna move into the show on the viewer. So the viewer itself, it's a client-side library that it's based on WebGL and 3JS. So it's purely HTML5 and JavaScript. So this is something that we need in order to work out with the viewer. So on the Node.js side, and Node.js not meaning that we're going to be writing Node.js code for the viewer, but it's just the reference for the tutorial that we're kind of like following along. So on the server, we also configure the public folder. So if you remember, we had one for routes, and then we're going to have one for public. So we're going to do in the public folder, we're going to start a .html file. This .html file, there's a siren going on outside. Sorry for that. Hope you guys don't hear it too much. We're going to do an index.html file. Later on, we're also going to create a JS folder like this, where all our .js files are going to be included, and then a CSS one. Okay, so we will do the CSS folder, and inside of that, we're going to do the main.css file, which is going to be the one that we use for making this site pretty. So let's move into this. Okay, so now for the index.html, we're going to be using Bootstrap, which is a third-party library that allows us to basically compose the layout of our website in a much simpler way. So you can always investigate what Bootstrap is later on, which can help you out with the styling. Give me 1 second. I have something on my throat. All right, much better. Okay, so now we will be moving into the JS3 side of it, which is what we're going to be using into listing our buckets and objects. And all those libraries are going to be coming from this content delivery network. So in the way that we will reference them, it will be by just adding the source location of where actually they're coming from. And with that, we will have an access to those libraries. And of course, the Autodesk Forge Viewer library. So the Viewer 3D min.js. And actually, we don't need the 3min.js anymore. That was for older versions. And the style.min.css. Okay. So we are going to be focusing on the Viewer v7, which is the current version of the viewer that we have. And then we're going to be doing, so the part of the HTML where we define the head with the title, the meta character set UTF-8, and then references about shortcut icon for being able to show something, and then also the common package ones that are coming from for like jQuery, Bootstrap, JS3, and so on. And then later on also the Forge Viewer files. So in the Forge Viewer files, we're going to get this reference to the viewer and then version 7 and we use this star sign in order to basically graph the latest version of the viewer. If this is something that we tend to do in most of our samples because we want you to kind of get an access to that latest version of the viewer. But we are aware that sometimes certain versions might actually have some problems when they get released. So in order for you to avoid that, I will teach you a couple of tricks from the console in order for you to figure it out what is the current version of the viewer running. And if you want to predefine one for you to always make sure that your application is running on a version that works for you, you can set up that version. So instead of doing the 7 star, you can do 7 version, let's say 26. So 7.26 and then 7.26. The viewer will always run in 7.26. Okay. And then we will do reference also to the project files. So as we mentioned before, we're creating a main CSS file. Okay. And we need to do a reference to that one. And the same thing for the JS and the forge3.js, the JS folder, forgeviewer.js. And then we get started with the body. So in the body, we will create a navigation bar with Bootstrap. Okay, so this will be kind of like the top part of our application with some links as well. So we can have a Forge logo, or you can have your own logo if you decide. You can customize it as much as you want. And that's going to be on the navbar thing. And this is the cool thing about Bootstrap, that you can just basically invoke those classes and say, this location is going to contain something that it's a navbar. And we are going to fix it to the top. So that navbar will always be at the top, which is something cool. And then we're going to start putting stuff in containers. So basically we'll split up the screen in different kind of containers where we're going to have a row dedicated to the JS3 and another one to the viewer. So that's kind of like we give it a specific size. So you have column small 4, which will be this part here. And then the rest of it, usually the screen with Bootstrap gets a total of 12. So the next one will be a column small 8, which will be occupying the space of the viewer. And then some information about that pop-up model that we're going to have in order to create our bucket, some text that we're going to add in there, and some buttons in order to trigger certain kind of actions on it, okay? All right, so what we're going to do is copy this, get back to here, and inside of the public, we're going to do a new file, and we're going to call this index.html, okay? So we're going to paste this. And since my IDE already recognizes an HTML, basically colors everything on the right kind of structure for the index.html. Okay, cool. So now we're gonna keep going. And now the main CSS. So now the CSS basically is the language that sets up the style of HTML documents. If you want to learn more about CSS, I think W3 Schools is actually a pretty good website to explain you some of the different functionality that you have for CSS. The way that I always explain this to people is when they're not too familiar with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I think all of us, we have used Word. So think about it like you have a Word document, right? So when you can type text and you're going to type a lot of text in order to create content. So that's going to be your HTML. But then you want to change, let's say, the size on the fonts, give it a little bit more style, make some of them bold, some of them italic, and then just kind of like split it up in different structure way. And that's going to be your main CSS. Basically, you're styling your document. And then the JavaScript part will be, let's say, if I click on that document and I want certain action to happen. So let's say it's a document with 500 pages. And if you click on that menu and it takes you to page numbers 375, that's a certain action that actually just happened there. So that's going to be kind of like your JavaScript or something like that. So it's some tip or some way to understand this in a different way, I guess. So for the CSS, we're going to be setting up certain sizes on the HTML, filling out the height, setting up some body like padding top and margin right, defining one for the buckets and then one for the viewer. So we're gonna copy this, go back to Visual Studio Code, and then in here we're gonna need one folder, which is gonna call CSS. Inside of CSS, we need a new file, which is basically the main.css. And we're going to paste this here, save it, and now we have our CSS. And then the last two files that we're going to be doing, it's the Forge3.js and the Forge Viewer.js. So this Forge3 basically will handle, using jQuery, it will basically identify if the document is ready. So basically when it displays the picture, right? That's the document ready. It will start with this function of preparing the app bucket 3 and then certain references to the buttons in case you hit the refresh bucket. It will basically refresh the entire app buckets 3. You can create a bucket. So if you click that, it will trigger this create new bucket and so on. Also some stuff about hitting like uploaded fields, creating new bucket actions on it. And then if you see here, we do a jQuery post to a certain URL. And it does a URL to /API/Forge OSS and buckets. And if you remember, we actually built those for this, which is, where is it? Oh no, sorry, it's here. So we do API Forge OSS. So it reads it from routes OSS, but now we're missing the /buckets, which is in this part, buckets, okay? So in that way, you know that whenever this action actually gets triggered, there is a jQuery post happening to this location. And then if everything gets passed on correctly with the bucket key, which is one of the parameters that we need, we will get a success response and basically just have a bucket created, okay? We prepare the buckets 3, same thing again. We can make another call to that endpoint. We add some kind of icons or just different kind of types depending of what we want to display for buckets or objects. And then we do some stuff about the viewer. Basically, we need to extract that URN that we are going to be obtaining when we translate. And when that URN is obtained, we're going to add it into here to later on pass it into the success call to the launch viewer. In this launch viewer, we're going to find it. Just move really quick here, which is the forgeviewer.js file. Once we pass that URN, we are setting up the environment for the Autodesk production and getting the forged token and initializing the viewer to later on display the stuff on the viewer. Okay? So pretty straightforward. I know it's a lot of content, but once you start reading the instructions and just kind of like debugging and kind of figuring out how this thing moves along, you start like making a lot of sense with it. Okay, so let's do this forge3.js. So let's copy this one, and we're gonna go here because we still need our folder. We're gonna call it JS. Okay, so inside of JS, we're gonna do forge3.js. I think it's capital like that. Yep, forge3.js. Okay, cool. And then this function itself is for the translation of the object. So whenever we upload a file right now, we can do a right click and say that we want to translate. And no, sorry. Yeah, translate. And then it will show us a pop-up for us to hit the translation. And this will invoke the API Forge model derivative jobs endpoint that we built in model derivative, this one, in order to start preparing the payload and then create the SPF with the 2D and 3D views. Okay. All right, so now get back to here. We're gonna do a new file. Let's call forgeviewer.js. Okay, so we go down to Forge Viewer. We're gonna copy this, paste this, save it, and we finish here. And then to summarize, the UI side of my app should have 4 files: index.html, main CSS, forge3, forgeviewer.js. If we are all set, the fun part. Basically, we're gonna run this app locally, and we will be able to debug from there. So, and what I said is that if you don't have any files, you can head over to these links in order to get some files. So actually, let's try that because I don't know where my files are. So we can just quickly, I actually haven't used inventory. Now, let's keep it simple. I'll grab a Revit one, rack basic sample, starts downloading, boom, we got it ready. All right, so now we will get to run it. So it says choose the Node.js. And how do we run it from VS Code? So we're gonna head over to debug. In the menu, we're gonna start debugging, okay? And it will start showing something like this at the bottom. And then it will tell us that it's listening on port 3000. And usually when I do live demos, something happens. So I'm pretty sure I might actually get a problem with one of my ports right now because I think I was running another app. Let me see if I need to stop it or something. This is something else that I was doing, but I always get this kind of stuff. But actually, you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let's see if maybe something else killed that and the demo gods are on our side today. So we start debugging. Ooh, actually worked. Awesome. Okay, so let's get back here. We open a new tab and we do localhost 3000. Okay, so this is our app running. Okay, yeah, I know. Not a lot of fun, doesn't have a lot of stuff already showing, but we can get started. So we have a location for our buckets and objects. We have the refresh button, but it's not doing anything right now because we don't have any buckets in this account. I just freshly created it. So we can now do new bucket. So for demonstration purposes, objects files are not automatically translated. So we are going to create a new bucket. We're going to call it Jaime Bootcamp 2020. We're going to go ahead and create this bucket. Boom, we have a new bucket. Okay, so now this bucket is empty, doesn't have anything in it. We need to upload something to it. So the file that I just download, so we can do upload file, it will bring in this. Let's go to downloads, and rack basic sample is here. It will probably take a couple of seconds. It gets updated. And now we have it here. Okay. But if I select this, it will tell me the file is not translated yet. I want to start translating. Okay. So the translation started, and it will say, please try again in a moment. So we're going to give it a couple of seconds / minutes, and then we're going to click again on the file in order to get the viewer started and visualize our Revit file. Okay. So let's see if that worked again. If not, yeah. So the translation job's still running at 2% complete. So please try again in a moment. Now it's going at 22. Yeah, it's going fast. 60, almost there. 65. Oh, no. Oh, no. 65 again. 71. Yeah, okay. We're moving along. While this finishes, questions that I can solve, let me know. I can unmute your mic and then we can chat. And I hope you guys are not bored yet. So let's see if this thing is done. Oh, 71 still? Seriously? Come on. Oh, there we go. We have a raised hand. Ta-da. Where are you? All right, you can speak now.
Well, the good news is I got to the point where the visualization works on localhost, so no problems for me. I guess it just went a little faster, so
that's fine.
Looking good. Question I have was, I don't know if it'll be addressed later, but it's a local host, so how would it be on to like a hyperlink? Is that a whole different process at that point?
Yeah, so there's some stuff that I can suggest to look into it, which are kind of like quick and easy to do. Not that quick, but quick. I guess you just gotta pay attention to what you're doing and all that. So let me just see if this thing loaded. Oh yes, perfect. All right, so let me just finish this and I'll get back to you in a second.
Okay.
Thank you, man. All right, so now we have the viewer running, and now we have a way to visualize our model. And we have different extensions from here if we want to explode the model. We have access to the model browser in order to visualize everything that matches the category of walls or floors or plumbing fixtures, roofs. I like furniture. That's not the furniture that I like. Where's the other one? Yes, this one. Yeah, so you can visualize furniture and so on. Okay. So show all objects. We can go back to here. We also have an access to the document browser. Like I told you, with model derivative, you can do an extraction with thumbnails. So we can visualize, let's say, the 2D plan that this thing has, and access to external links. So in case we want to get some information about that railway connection, it basically tells us what's going on with that. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that you guys are able to play around with it. So let me lower Tada's hand and let me ask you, did everybody get to this point? If the answer is yes, can you raise a hand? 3, 4, one more. It's 5. Perfect. Awesome. Cool. All right. So I think I see everybody got to this point. So let's see. I think I still have some time. So I'm going to give you some bonus stuff that I don't. It's not part of the bootcamp, but since you guys are here, why not? I can show you some stuff. So one way, we interact quite a lot with the developer console. So if you're familiar with Chrome itself, we can do quite a lot of stuff from here. So for example, like I told you before, we want to find out in which version of the viewer we're running. So we can do a simple type of LMB. So LMV, it's a code that we have internally for us to use, which is called Large Model Viewer, okay? And from here, we can get to, for example, check what the viewer version is. So we hit this command. Basically, we are running on 7.29, okay? So that's one way to identify which version are we running on, okay? Then there is other stuff that you can kind of like play around with it. For example, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. All right. For example, if we select something and we want to find out the ID of that, I don't think we have the, oh yeah, we do have viewer here. Okay, so because we set it up in our project as a global variable, so we have access to that. So we can do viewer dot, my caps are on, selection. And we see we have an ID of 2212. So let's say if we want to click again outside, sorry, and we want to select that part again, we can do viewer dot select, and then in here we can pass in 2212, and you see now it got highlighted. So basically we're just selecting directly from the code. And in that way, we can start doing a lot of different things. Like we can do, let's say, extraction of properties. So viewer dot get properties. This one is kind of like, it needs a callback. So we're gonna be passing, we know the ID, so we can do 2212, comma, function e, and then console.log of e. Let's see if this is gonna work. Close that, we close this. Yeah, so now we have a way to extract the properties of that specific basic roof, okay? So now we can see all the property values for that roof specifically. So we can get back again information about the DB ID for the identification. We have actually access to the external ID. This is kind of like the GUID ID from Revit. Also the name that includes that basic roof with that ID itself. And then the entire list of the array of all the properties. So if I open this, for example, let's focus on the one area. So area display value 1731419. If we go into properties of that selected item, we go here and we move along to area. And then basically just to make it pretty, 173.1 meters squared. Okay. So that's how can you in some way kind of like start accessing stuff with the console itself. So you can start using that kind of code later on. And I think on the tutorial that we're gonna have on Wednesday, Michael Beal, my colleague, will be talking about how to extend the viewer functionality by creating your own JavaScript extension. So you can add your own kind of buttons here that create certain actions and then be able to create this workflows. And let me see, I have a question. So they are read-only, and if you want to do the update on a property, what you can do is basically recreate this entire property panel and create, let's say, property panel version 2, which allows you to change that value itself. So basically you will get back all that array that I just showed you and display on the new one. And instead of displaying that area value, you will be getting that value from, let's say, an external database or some input that you actually set up. And the only thing is that don't expect this to change the value into the model also in Revit, because you're just changing it directly in the viewer. Okay. If you want to change it in Revit as well from the viewer, you could do that, but you will have to use design automation later. So that's a tutorial that we are going to have on Friday. Basically, the use of design automation in order to run this kind of plugins that run for, let's say, Revit, AutoCAD, Inventor, and so on, and to run it directly, all of it on the cloud. So it's one cool bootcamp also to attend. Okay. I don't know if that answers your question, Kareem. Awesome. Perfect. Okay. And then Tade, let me show you something that we have for that, what you were asking. Let me go into my GitHub. I think I have some stuff here. Where do I have it? Let's see, maybe this room configuration might have it. Yeah. So most of the repos that we have, they have this deploy to Heroku, button that you can use in order to send it over to Heroku, and then from there, get started with this part. So, for example, if I click on this, it will take me. Oh yeah, well that will not work right now. 1 second, let me just log in and I can show you again. Okay, so let me see. I'm gonna accept this thing, and then we can try again. All right, so let me go to, where are we? Room configuration, medical. Yeah, so if I hit deploy to Heroku, now that I'm online, I'm actually being able to create this app, and I can give it an app name. I can include the parameters that I need. So if you remember in the tutorial, we were doing the client ID, client secret, and the callback URL. So you can pass in those parameters in here in order to deploy your app. And then your environment will be able to read those values and then just start getting with that part. You can watch this video. Actually, this basically shows you how to do it. So Augusto Goncalves, one of my colleagues, he did the entire video on how to deploy into Heroku. So actually, let me give you this thing. That way you guys can all try it and have your applications set up in there. Okay. So with that, do we have any other questions? And feel free to raise your hand. Oh, Tade, what's up?
So, this is a pretty good run through for me because I've seen this kind of guide for Forge before, but I was kind of like lost in how to even get started. So this definitely helped me out a lot. I think a lot of people want to just get over that beginning hurdle.
Awesome.
Understand. Yeah, so this really was very useful in the way you showed us and explained the reasons you use different bits of code and how they work. That was very, very helpful to me to kind of understand it better. So this was useful, and I like how we kind of progressively developed it, and can show something for my work at the end of the day. So
awesome.
It was kind of thing I was looking for, because I was like, okay, I think I can do this, but I was trying to get over the launch setup hump of it. So this is, I think, a great course, and it's going to be recorded, so I can always review this later or share it with somebody else. It's going to be very, very beneficial to me. For the next step, is Eric, so there's 5 days this week for this course. Is tomorrow connected to today's lesson, or are they all a little bit different? Is it like we just start over tomorrow with the connection to 360?
Yeah, so tomorrow you will get started with this similar stuff like this one, but connecting to BIM 360. I'm not giving the class tomorrow. It's going to be one of my colleagues, Dennis Grigor, who's going to be doing the Node.js one, and Augusto will be doing the .NET one. On Wednesday, it will be Michael Beal doing the extensions. And then on Thursday, I will be back, and I will be doing the modification of this this sample into including your dashboard functionality, for example. So you will end up with an application that you could try to just have the dashboard functionality included in order for you to just interact with the models itself. And then on Friday, I will be back again, and I will be doing the design automation one.
Good. So this is a good start. I probably have 100 questions, but I think what I want to do first is like, I got through pretty far here. I think we all did. Whoever's still on the call, we got to a pretty good place where we have like something on the viewer, which I'm very happy about.
Awesome. Cool.
Let's pretend for a minute like we just weren't here for the rest of the week. Are there 4?
They're going to be recorded too.
And
Yeah.
are they documented the way this class was documented already on the website?
No.
Okay,
like if you want to even like take advantage and just go over your stuff, here is the other tutorial.
Mhm.
Here is the modify your models with design automation. Here's the information about the viewer extensions. And here's the dashboard one.
Okay, that's
so
good.
Everything is there. It's just that we like to do this. Well, at least me personally, I like to walk you guys through what's going on this ones, because you can easily just go in, copy paste, and then have this thing running. But then, for example, on something that I mentioned, like the transient policy for the buckets, you will be like, my models are actually disappearing after a day. Where do I change this? But now you know that the tutorial is set up to get rid of the stuff within 24 hours. But then later on, you can actually change it for you to create buckets that are persistent, and it will not get rid of your data. So you can keep testing and doing that.
Yeah, I like the context. That's really helpful when we're trying to understand the backbone of all the services, because it's not like a scratch kind of like out of nowhere project. There's a lot of like web services we have to be knowledgeable about. So that really can help me understand why something would work, such as the buckets and the other configurations and how you connect to like an external website host. So that was really helpful. So that's good to see that. And one big question that's just kind of like outside the scope of this talk was, would all this on the back end work if it's at the end of the day we did a lot of back end? Would this all work with, say, a Flask or Django with Python configuration?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, like I guess the server side part of the APIs are all REST based, so whatever you end up using on the back, it's fine. So it should work. I have done before, for example, a quick start for AWS, that if you know a bit of AWS and you want to host your applications in AWS, you can basically grab this project and just trigger it in one of the cloud formations that we created for a quick start for Forge, and automatically will replicate the entire environments, making it fault tolerant, always accessible, like scaling up, scaling down, setup, and you don't have to kind of worry too much about that. And it's basically running either the .NET Core version or the Node.js version. So yeah, no, it's good. And I have a question on the chat that says, do persistent buckets cost more cloud credits? Buckets do not cost any credits, so they're just focused into storage space. So for example, and it doesn't matter what kind of policy you're using for the buckets. We don't charge you for that. The only thing that costs money in this sense will be the translation of your files into the one ready for the viewer. So if they are translated, that's when we charge you money. Anything else at this moment, we don't. So you can store your files and all that. Okay. So, and also Kent is asking me for the links for the Thursday and Friday. So let me actually get you this ones. Registration links. I gave you Tuesday, Friday. Let me click on this one. And let me click on this one. So this one is the Thursday one. And this one is the Friday one. Modify your models. Yep, that's the one. And okay, you guys have all the links now. So in the chat, you can check them and just get them from there. And I will say, like, click on those links, click on the YouTube one, so in that way you keep it in your tabs, because as soon as we finish with this, it will wipe out the chat. Okay? Yeah, sure thing. Any other questions that you guys may have? So again, remember, tomorrow we're going to be doing connecting to Beam 360 and Fusion Teams. On Wednesday, extending the viewer with extensions. The 22nd, we're going to have dashboard functionality. And on the 23rd, modification of your models using design automation. how to get support. So if you're not familiar how to get support with Autodesk Forge, you can head over to Stack Overflow. And then whenever you ask a question with the tag Autodesk-Forge, Autodesk-Viewer, or model derivative, we get it into our automated system. And then from there, we take the questions in order to respond back to you. We usually have an SLA of 24 to 48 hours. At this moment, it's a little bit busy for us because we're preparing all the content for Autodesk University virtual mode. So if you're not registered for Autodesk University, I will say go for it. This year it's free. You get access to seeing all the content from the latest stuff in regards to Autodesk products, the Forge platform updates, and so on. The week before Autodesk University, we're going to have a Forge hackathon. So it's going to be a full week of a hackathon with certain challenges that you guys can interact with and then participate. And we're going to have really cool prizes as well. So the information, you can find it in this link, Eventbrite. Where is it? Event. I think I can get it. This link. Let me type Forge Hackathon. That's not the one that I wanted to show. One second. Right. Forge Hackathon. Should come up here. There we go. This is the one that I wanted to show you guys. Not my internal stuff. I'm gonna have to cut that from the recording. Yeah, so let me post you this one. So like I said, come and join us. It's gonna be a full week of a hackathon. We announced the challenges already. So if you get your team set up and you're gonna start thinking about ideas of what you wanna set up and create, definitely sign up for it. We will be giving some swag to the first 100 participants that are registered. I think we have around 80 people right now registered. The number that you saw is the number of teams. So there's still some swag available. They're going to be really cool. So I will say, think about it, make the time. It's the week of the 9th to the 13th of November. So come and join us. Different challenges. The winners will get a chance to showcase their work at Autodesk University. So definitely something cool to consider, and it's free to attend. So why not? And yeah, that's it for me. Do you have any other questions that I can help you out with? I see one. Gabriel, you wanted to say something? I enabled your mic, Gabriel, in case you want to say something. And if not, it's okay. Maybe you raised the hand by mistake or something like that. Okay, cool. Yeah, it was by mistake. All right, so with that, I want to thank you guys for sticking with me until the end. I'm glad to see that everybody had a good chance to get their applications up and running. I will say, take a look at that video that I sent in the chat. So that way you guys can investigate the fact to host it on your own Heroku link in order to kind of like showcase and access from different locations. And yeah, I think that will be it for today. Awesome, cool. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate. And then if you want to follow along, if you use Twitter, remember it's the AfroJME handle. So come over and chat over with me over there. All right. Okay. With that, thank you guys so much. And I will see you next time. And please don't forget to get the links. I'll give you a couple more minutes for you to get the links. All right, cool. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.